I sat frozen in the front pew of St. Catherine's Church, my hands gripping the program so tightly the edges crumpled. My daughter-in-law Sandra had just stood up during my husband's memorial service and announced to everyone that she and my son Kevin were selling our beach house in Cape May, the one James and I had built together 32 years ago. "James wanted this," Sandra said, her voice carrying through the church with practiced confidence. "He told Kevin and me that the house was too much for Margaret to handle alone. The sale will close next month for $2.3 million, and we'll make sure she's comfortable in a nice assisted living facility." People nodded sympathetically. Someone behind me whispered, "How thoughtful." My sister Helen reached over and squeezed my hand, probably thinking Sandra was being kind. But I had been living in that house for 32 years. James and I had picked out every tile, planted every rosebush, refinished every piece of driftwood we'd collected from the beach. More than that, James had promised me, over and over during his last months, that the house was mine. We'd built it with money from my teaching career and his construction business, 50-50. It was supposed to be my home until I died. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. Kevin wouldn't even look at me from where he stood next to Sandra, his arm around her shoulders. That was 3 weeks ago, in October of 2023. Let me back up. I'm Margaret Sullivan. I taught English at Cape May High School for 37 years before I retired in 2015. My husband James was a contractor, owned Sullivan Construction. We met when I was 24 and he came to fix my apartment's leaky roof. He was 26, had just started his business, and showed up covered in sawdust with the most genuine smile I'd ever seen. We got married within a year, saved every penny we could. By the time I was 31, we had enough for a down payment on a narrow lot just 3 blocks from the beach. James drew up the plans himself. We built that house together, literally. I'd come home from teaching and help him paint, sand floors, install cabinets. It took us 2 years, but when it was finished, it was perfect. A blue Victorian with white trim, a wraparound porch, and a turret room where I kept my books. We never had children right away. I had 3 miscarriages in my 30s. When I was almost 40, I got pregnant with Kevin. It was a miracle, the doctor said. Kevin was born in 1992. James was over the moon. He built Kevin a treehouse in the backyard, taught him how to use a hammer, took him fishing off the pier every Saturday morning. Kevin was a good boy growing up. Maybe a little entitled, but what only child isn't? James and I gave him everything we could. Paid for his college, helped him buy his first car, let him live with us until he was 28 while he figured things out. Then he met Sandra. Sandra worked in pharmaceutical sales. She was 32 when they met, 4 years older than Kevin, and from the moment I met her, something felt off. She was polite enough, but there was a calculation in her eyes. She asked pointed questions about our finances, about the house, about James's business. At their wedding in 2019, she made a comment to Helen that stuck with me. "When you marry someone, you marry their assets too." James brushed off my concerns. "You're being overprotective," he'd say. "Kevin's happy. That's what matters." Maybe I was. Maybe I just didn't want to lose my son. But things changed after the wedding. Kevin and Sandra moved to Philadelphia, about 2 hours away. They'd visit maybe once every 2 months, usually when they needed something. Sandra always had suggestions, improvements the house needed, things James and I should update. "This kitchen is so outdated," she'd say, running her finger along the vintage Formica countertop that James and I had installed ourselves. "You should really renovate before it hurts the property value." Then, in early 2022, James started feeling tired all the time. He'd come home from job sites and fall asleep in his chair. He lost weight. I begged him to see a doctor. When he finally did, in March, they found it: pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctor gave him 6 months. He made it 13. Those 13 months were the longest and shortest of my life. James couldn't work anymore. His business partner, Tom Brennan, bought him out, gave us a fair price that padded our savings. But James's real concern was me. He was terrified of leaving me alone. "You're going to be okay," he'd tell me every night, holding my hand in bed. "The house is paid off. You've got your pension and Social Security, the savings from the business. You'll be comfortable." "I know," I'd whisper back. "I'll be okay. And the house is yours. I'm putting it in your name only." Kevin and Sandra have their own lives. This is your home, Maggie. Promise me you'll stay here as long as you want." "I promise." We talked to our lawyer, Ben Morrison, back in April 2022, right after the diagnosis. James had everything set up. The will was clear. The house was mine, no questions. Our savings would be split, with me getting 2/3 and Kevin getting 1/3 after my death. James wanted to make sure I was secure first. Kevin and Sandra visited more frequently during James's illness. I thought maybe they were finally showing up for us. Sandra would bring casseroles, ask if we needed anything. Kevin would help me get James into bed, adjust his oxygen tank. But I noticed things. Whispered conversations between Kevin and Sandra in the hallway, the way Sandra would study the house when she thought I wasn't looking. Once, I caught her taking photos of the turret room. "Just documenting family memories," she said with a smile. 2 months before James died, in February 2023, Kevin asked to speak with his father alone. I gave them privacy, went for a walk on the beach, even though it was freezing. When I came back, James was exhausted, pale. He wouldn't tell me what they talked about, but he held me extra tight that night. James died on April 3rd, 2023, peacefully, in our bedroom, with me beside him. The days after were a blur. Helen came and stayed with me. Kevin and Sandra arrived the next day, took over the funeral arrangements. I was grateful. I couldn't think straight. At the funeral, Sandra was perfect. She greeted guests, organized the reception at our house, made sure everyone had food and drinks. She gave a beautiful speech about James being a father figure to her. People kept telling me how lucky I was to have such a devoted daughter-in-law. That's when she made the announcement about selling the house. Right there, in the church, with James's casket 20 feet away. I couldn't process it. People came up to me after, patting my shoulder, saying things like, "It's for the best, Margaret. You can't maintain that big house alone." I just nodded, numb. Helen drove me home after the funeral. We didn't talk about Sandra's announcement. What was there to say? Helen knew about James's will, but she also knew that arguing with Sandra was like arguing with a brick wall. That evening, Kevin and Sandra came over. We sat in the living room, the same room where James and I had shared coffee every morning for 32 years. His reading chair was still there, his bookmark still holding his place in a Tom Clancy novel he'd never finish. "Mom," Kevin started, not quite meeting my eyes. "We need to talk about next steps." Sandra pulled out a folder. "We've already contacted a realtor. Beth Morrison, actually, Ben's wife. She specializes in historic properties. She thinks we can list by the end of the month and close within 60 days. My voice finally came back. "What are you talking about?" Sandra blinked, as if surprised by the question. "The house sale. We discussed this at the funeral." "You announced it. We didn't discuss anything." Kevin shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, Dad told me he wanted the house sold. He didn't want you burdened with it." "That's not true. James promised me this house. It's in the will." Sandra's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Actually, Margaret, there was a change to the will. James added a codicil 2 months before he died. Kevin has power of attorney for the estate." "What?" "No. We met with Ben in April." James was clear. "Things changed when James's condition deteriorated," Sandra said smoothly. "He wanted to make sure everything was handled properly. He signed updated documents in February. Ben has them on file." I felt like I'd been punched. February. That was when Kevin had asked to speak to James alone. "I want to see Ben," I said. "Of course," Sandra nodded. "He's expecting your call. But Mom, we need to be realistic. This house is worth $2.3 million. The property taxes alone are $18,000 a year. The maintenance, the insurance, keeping up with repairs, it's too much for one person. Dad knew that. He wanted you comfortable and secure." "I am comfortable here. For now," Sandra said. "But what about when you're 80? 85? We've toured a wonderful assisted living community in West Cape May. Bright, clean, activities every day. You'd have your own apartment, meals provided, health care on site. I'm 68 years old. I'm not moving into assisted living." Kevin finally spoke up. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Dad thought this through. He wanted this for you." "Then why didn't he tell me?" No answer. After they left, I sat in James's chair and cried until I had no tears left. Helen made tea and sat with me, not saying anything. What could she say? The next morning, I called Ben Morrison. His secretary said he was in court but would call me back. He didn't call until 3 days later. "Margaret, I'm so sorry for your loss," he said. "I know this is a difficult time." "Ben," Kevin said, James changed the will. Added power of attorney. "Is that true?" A pause. "Yes." James came in with Kevin in February. He was very weak by then. He signed documents giving Kevin control over estate decisions, including property sales. "Why wasn't I there?" Another pause. "James said he didn't want to upset you. Said you'd been under so much stress with his care. Can I see the documents?" "Of course. I'll have my secretary make copies." "But Margaret, I have to tell you, everything is legally sound. James was of sound mind when he signed. I confirmed that myself. He promised me the house, Ben." Over and over. "I know, and I'm sorry. But the codicil supersedes the original will in regard to property distribution. Kevin has the legal authority to sell." I picked up the documents the next day, sat in my car in the parking lot and read every word. There it was, James's signature. Weak, shaky, but his. The document gave Kevin power of attorney over all property decisions. It authorized him to sell the house to ensure Margaret Sullivan's long-term financial security and appropriate care. I drove to the beach and walked for hours, tried to understand. Had James really done this? Had he really believed I couldn't handle the house? Or had Kevin convinced him somehow when he was weak and dying? I thought about that February conversation. James had been exhausted afterward, upset. He'd held me so tightly that night, like he was afraid to let go. For 2 weeks, I existed in a fog. Sandra called every few days with updates. The realtor had been to the house, taken photos. They already had interested buyers. "Everything's moving along smoothly," she'd say brightly. I couldn't fight them. The documents were legal. Ben had confirmed it. I started packing, mechanically, putting 32 years of life into boxes. Every item was a memory. The Christmas ornaments James and I had collected from every trip we took. The photo albums. His tools in the garage. My books in the turret. Helen came over one afternoon and found me sitting in the middle of the turret room, surrounded by boxes. "Maggie, you can't give up," she said. "What choice do I have? Something's not right. James wouldn't do this to you." He did, though. He signed the papers. Maybe Kevin pressured him. Maybe he didn't understand what he was signing. Ben said James was of sound mind. Helen sat down next to me. "Then why did James spend 13 months telling you the house was yours? Why did he promise you, over and over? Why would he change his mind and not tell you?" I didn't have an answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to James's office, the small room off the kitchen where he kept his business files. I'd been avoiding it. Couldn't bear to sort through his things. But Helen's words kept echoing. I started going through his desk. Bills, receipts, old job estimates. Nothing unusual. Then I found a locked drawer. James kept the key on his keyring, which was in a dish on the dresser. I got it and opened the drawer. Inside was a leather journal. James had never been much of a writer, but his therapist had suggested journaling during his illness. I'd seen him writing in it sometimes, late at night. I hesitated. This felt private. But James was gone, and I needed to understand. I opened it. The entries started in March 2022, right after his diagnosis. Most were short, scattered thoughts about death, fear, memories. But then I found an entry from February 6th, 2023. Kevin came today, asked to talk alone. He said Maggie can't handle the house by herself, that she's in denial about aging, that the property taxes and maintenance will drain our savings and she'll end up with nothing. He had papers. Power of attorney. Said it's standard, just to help Maggie with decisions she might not be equipped to make. I don't know. He's my son. He loves her. Maybe he's right. I'm so tired. Can't think straight. Signed the papers. Maggie was out walking. I'll tell her when I feel stronger. My hands were shaking. The entry continued. I don't feel right about this. Maggie is sharp, capable. She doesn't need Kevin making decisions for her, but he said it's reversible, that we can change it any time. Said not to worry, Maggie, with it while I'm sick. Why do I feel like I did something wrong? There were more entries. February 10th. Asked Kevin about the papers. He said, don't worry, everything's taken care of. Sandra says they just want to make sure Maggie's protected. But Maggie should be the one protected by my decisions, not theirs. Going to call Ben tomorrow. Change it back. February 12th. Too weak to call. Kevin says I'm confused, that I already talked to Ben. Did I? Can't remember. Everything's foggy. February 20th. Tried to tell Maggie today. Couldn't find the words. She was so happy, talking about spring planting in the garden. How do I tell her I might have given away her home? Kevin says I'm overthinking, that it's all for her benefit. But his eyes, I don't recognize my son anymore. The last entry about it was March 15th, just 3 weeks before he died. I made a mistake. I know I did. The papers Kevin had me sign, they weren't about helping Maggie. They were about controlling her. I see it now. Sandra's been taking photos of the house. Property comps, she says. Kevin won't look me in the eye. I tried to call Ben. Too weak to dial. Asked Maggie to call. She thought I meant for pain medication. I'm out of time. I'm leaving Maggie alone with them, and I can't protect her. God forgive me. I sat on the floor of the office and sobbed. James had known. He'd realized what Kevin and Sandra were doing, and he'd been too weak, too confused, too sick to stop it. But there was more in the drawer. Underneath the journal was a manila envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter, dated March 28th, just 6 days before James died. His handwriting was barely legible, but I could make out every word. My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for what I did, for what I let Kevin convince me to do. I signed papers I shouldn't have. Papers that give him control over the house. I was weak and confused and I thought he was trying to help you. I was wrong. Kevin is not the boy we raised. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe we gave him too much and he never learned to work for anything. Maybe Sandra changed him. I don't know, but I know he's planning to sell our house. Your house. The one we built together. I tried to fix it. I called Ben and told him I wanted to revoke the power of attorney. Ben said we'd take care of it, that he'd draft the revocation papers. But I got sicker before he could bring them. I don't know if he ever filed anything. You need to check. Also, Maggie, Kevin forced me to sign those papers. I was on heavy pain medication. I was scared. He said if I didn't sign, they'd have me declared incompetent and you'd lose everything. He said this was the only way to protect you. I believed him. I shouldn't have. Ben can verify that I called him about the revocation. February 24th, I called from the hospital. Ben's secretary answered. Then Ben got on the line. I told him I wanted to undo what I'd done. He said he'd handle it. Call him. Make him check his records. The house is yours, Maggie. I built it for you. I wanted to grow old with you there. I wanted you to sit on that porch and watch the ocean and be happy. Don't let Kevin take that from you. I love you. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to protect you at the end. But you're strong. You've always been the strong one. Fight for our home. Forever yours, James. I read the letter 3 times. Then I picked up the phone and called Ben Morrison at home. It was 10 o'clock at night. I didn't care. Ben, it's Margaret Sullivan. I need to know something. Did James call you on February 24th about revoking the power of attorney? Silence. Then, Margaret, it's late. Did he call you? Yes, he did. He said he wanted to revoke the documents. And did you file the revocation? A longer silence. I prepared the papers, but James died before he could sign them. Without his signature, I couldn't file. The original power of attorney stands. But he told you he wanted to revoke it. That proves he didn't want Kevin to have that authority. It proves he had doubts. But legally, the last signed document is what matters. I'm sorry, Margaret. Kevin forced him to sign under duress. James was on pain medication. He was scared. Can you prove that? I looked at the journal, at the letter. Yes, I can. The next morning, I showed up at Ben's office without an appointment. I brought James's journal and letter. Ben read them both carefully. This is compelling. he admitted. But Margaret, Kevin will argue that James was confused from medication, that these are the ramblings of a dying man. James was clear enough to know he'd made a mistake, clear enough to call you, clear enough to write me a letter explaining everything. Ben leaned back in his chair. Okay, here's what we can do. We can file a challenge to the power of attorney on the grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity. We argue that Kevin took advantage of James's weakened state to coerce him into signing. We use the journal and letter as evidence. We use my phone records showing James called to revoke. But I have to warn you, this will be expensive, and it's not guaranteed to work. How expensive? Legal fees could run $50,000 to $100,000, maybe more if Kevin fights hard. I thought about our savings. The money from James's business buyout. We had about $400,000 in the bank. James had wanted most of that for me, for my security. But what security would I have without my home? Do it, I said. Ben filed the challenge the next day. Kevin called me within hours, furious. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "You're wasting money on lawyers? Money that's supposed to take care of you?" "I'm fighting for my home. The one your father built for me. Dad gave me that authority because he knew you couldn't handle this. Your father regretted signing those papers," he told me. "He wrote it down. He tried to revoke them. He was dying. He was confused. You're being manipulated by Helen and that lawyer. This is embarrassing, Mom." Sandra got on the line. Her voice was ice cold. "Margaret, we're trying to help you, but if you insist on fighting us, we'll fight back. We have legal documents. You have the confused writings of a man on morphine. You'll lose, and you'll waste your savings in the process. Is that what you want?" "I want my house." "Then you're going to end up with nothing." They hung up. The legal battle took 4 months. Ben subpoenaed all of James's medical records, proving what medications he was on when he signed the power of attorney. We deposed Kevin, who was evasive and contradictory. We deposed Sandra, who was polished and prepared but couldn't explain why she'd been taking photos of the house months before James died. Property appreciation research, she claimed. We tracked down James's hospice nurse, Patricia, who testified that in James's final weeks, he'd expressed regret about signing something Kevin wanted and had asked her to help him contact a lawyer. She thought he was confused and gently redirected him. "I wish I'd listened," she said on the stand, crying. The turning point came when Ben found something in his office records. His secretary had made a note of James's February 24th call. James Sullivan called, "Revoking POA, signed 2/6. Says son pressured him, very upset. Wants docs prepared as soon as possible." That note was dated and timed. It was official record that James, just 6 weeks after signing the power of attorney, wanted it revoked. It showed clear, consistent intent. Kevin's lawyer argued that James never followed through, that he must have changed his mind again. But the journal entries, the letter to me, and the nurse's testimony painted a clear picture. James had been manipulated, regretted it immediately, tried to fix it, and ran out of time. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Henderson, took 2 weeks to make her decision. When we reconvened in court, I held Helen's hand so tightly my fingers went numb. Judge Henderson looked at Kevin and Sandra, then at me. "I've reviewed all the evidence in this case," she said, "and I'm troubled by what I see. Mr. Kevin Sullivan obtained power of attorney from his dying father, a man on significant pain medication, during a private conversation that excluded the person most affected by these documents, Mrs. Margaret Sullivan. The evidence shows that James Sullivan regretted this decision almost immediately and took multiple steps to revoke it before his death. The journal entries are detailed and consistent. The letter to Mrs. Sullivan is clear in its intent. The phone call to Mr. Morrison is documented, and the testimony of the hospice nurse corroborates James Sullivan's state of mind. She paused. The court finds that Kevin Sullivan obtained the power of attorney through undue influence over a vulnerable person. The power of attorney is hereby declared invalid. The original will, which leaves the marital home to Margaret Sullivan, stands as written. The house belongs to Mrs. Sullivan. I couldn't breathe. Helen was crying. Ben squeezed my shoulder. But Judge Henderson wasn't done. Furthermore, the court is referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Taking advantage of a dying person for financial gain may constitute elder abuse and fraud under state law. This court takes such matters seriously." Kevin's face went white. Sandra stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. 3 weeks later, the district attorney filed charges against Kevin for fraud and elder abuse. Sandra was charged as an accessory, as emails between her and Kevin showed she'd orchestrated the entire plan, researched the legal loopholes, and coached Kevin on what to say to James. The trial was brutal. More details came out. Sandra had been researching the value of Cape May properties for over a year before James got sick. She'd identified our house as a prime investment. She'd convinced Kevin that they deserved the money more than I did, that I'd be fine in assisted living, that James's assets were really Kevin's inheritance. Emails showed Sandra writing to Kevin, "Your mom will live maybe another 15 to 20 years. That's $18K a year in property taxes, plus maintenance. That's over $350K of your inheritance going to keep her in a house she doesn't need. Be smart about this." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Kevin guilty of elder fraud and financial exploitation. Sandra was found guilty as an accessory. Kevin was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Sandra got 18 months. I sat in the courtroom and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just exhaustion. This was my son, my only child, the baby I'd prayed for, the boy James had built a treehouse for. After the sentencing, Kevin looked at me for the first time in months. "Mom," he said. Just that. Just Mom. I stood up and walked out. That was 8 months ago. I'm writing this from my turret room, looking out at the ocean. It's June now. The roses James planted are blooming. I've kept every single one alive. I had the porch repainted, the same blue it's always been. I refinished the kitchen countertops myself, kept the vintage Formica. Helen helped me hang new curtains, the same pattern James and I chose 32 years ago. I'm still here. I'm still home. Kevin writes to me sometimes from prison, apologetic letters that feel hollow. He says Sandra manipulated him, that he was weak. Maybe that's true. Maybe he was always weak and I just didn't want to see it. I don't visit him. I don't write back. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive, even for your own child, maybe especially for your own child. But I did do one thing. I established a foundation in James's name. It provides legal aid to elderly people fighting financial exploitation by family members. I donated $100,000 to start it. James would have liked that, turning our pain into something that helps others. I'm 69 now. I walk on the beach every morning. I tend my garden. I volunteer at the high school library, helping students with their college essays. I have coffee with Helen every Wednesday. I live exactly the life James and I planned. The house is mine. My home. The place where I loved and was loved, where I built a life. Nobody can take that from me now. I made sure of it, legally. The house is in a trust that can't be touched, with Helen as the trustee. When I die, it goes to charity. Kevin won't see a penny of it. Some people think I'm being cruel, that I should forgive my son, let him back into my life when he's released. But those people didn't watch their husband die while their son plotted to steal their home. They didn't read journal entries of a dying man's realization that his child had betrayed him. I sleep in the bedroom James and I shared for 32 years. His reading chair is still in the corner, that bookmark still holding his place. Sometimes I sit in it and imagine he's standing in the doorway, smiling at me the way he did every morning. "You did it, Maggie," he'd say. "You fought for us." Yes, I did. And I'm still fighting. Every day I stay in this house. Every day I prove that I'm exactly as capable and strong as James always believed I was. This house is my home. This house is my victory. This house is my testament to a love that even death and betrayal couldn't destroy. And I'm never leaving.